there, my name's Isha and welcome on board here at the Higher Life Academy. Now, in this episode of Higher Life TV, I want to talk about spiritual neglect. Now, if this is the first time you're watching one of my episodes, every week or every couple of weeks, I take a concept which has been considered religious or spiritual or esoteric and show you how it can be a practical tool that can greatly improve the quality of your life. And spiritual neglect is such an important process for us to be aware of. And it's an area of our lives that, at least in modern life, we pay often very little attention to. Now, spiritual neglect is when we stop tending to or paying attention to our spiritual self. So signs of spiritual neglect are usually when you're feeling some kind of loneliness can be a sign, some kind of confusion, ill health, feeling unwell physically, psychologically or mentally, but having no obvious cause for that unwellness or that sense of lostness or that sense of isolation or confusion. So it's considered sort of esoteric in some way. People call them first world problems. Now, if you just pay attention to the media these days, you'll see that we perceive ourselves at the moment to have a kind of epidemic of these problems, which is of feeling lost in our lives, not having a clear compass or a clear idea of our purpose or our direction. And lostness can show up in many different forms. It can just be losing a job or a breakdown of a relationship, or this feeling I was talking about of discontentment, or a lack of clarity about, why you're here on earth and, why you're doing what you're doing on an everyday basis. The second major thing that's showing up at the moment is loneliness and isolation, feeling disconnected from life and from other people, and, even living in big cities or being part of big corporations or having big circles of friends, and just inherently feeling lonely inside those experiences and not really understanding why. And the third one I mentioned is ill health. We seem to have this increase in mental health issues, in emotional health issues, and in energetic health issues, which play out in all forms of diseases. And there's a lot of exploration at the moment as to the root cause of some of these issues in modern life. Now, personally, after a decade of coaching people as a transformational life coach and working with lots of what I would call affluent, well-educated clients and seeing these problems arise constantly, I've come to understand that the root cause of most of these issues is a form of spiritual neglect. And that is when we are living our lives through our ego self, through our need to survive in the world, not only survive materially, but survive socially, to be adaptive and to be tapped into what's happening out there. That uses a lot of our mental, physical and emotional energy. And it can create a lot of confusion, loneliness, and isolation, right? Because out there doesn't always give us a clear roadmap of how we should be living our lives and what we should be valuing. And spiritual neglect also shows up in overconsumerism, feeling that as human beings, what we're mainly doing is working to consume, working to achieve, working to have. And over time, this cycle of, giving a lot of ourselves, a lot of our time, our energy and our focus in order just to keep consuming and having doesn't seem to be generating the kind of outcomes that we would like, which is to feel more contented, to feel more connected, to feel more aspirational, and to feel this kind of deep sense of achievement that comes when you're really living in a purposeful and harmonious way. Okay, so this idea of spiritual neglect, it differs quite significantly from spiritual abuse. And I just want to spend a minute on that because it's incredibly important given the shifts in attitudes towards religion and following any type of prescribed ideology as a way of life. Spiritual abuse occurs when a power outside of yourself, such as a family system, a religious authority, or any kind of institution that has the ability to have power over you, does use that power over you to manipulate you in the name of some kind of greater good. And I don't want to go too far down into that trajectory. However, it is important because a lot of people that I've come across and a lot of people in our modern life have a real apprehension towards exploring and tending to their spiritual self, simply out of a fear or a belief that somehow they'll be manipulated, or somehow this process of tending to your spiritual self means that you would have to ascribe or prescribe to some kind of ideology outside of yourself. And this is a huge part of the work I do, is helping you to understand that tending to your spiritual self and fueling that aspect of your nature has nothing to do with religion or any kind of ideology. It is simply taking time out of your day, out of your busy day, to be still, to listen to your inner voice, to explore who you are at your most authentic self, and to understand how your ego works in the world. And I'll do a lesson on the ego next week, but just to sort of fine tune that, your ego is your socially constructed self. It's that part of you that adapts out there in the external world so that you can survive and thrive. However, your authentic self is that part of you that remains consistent, that makes up your nature as a human being. And this is the part of yourself that is spiritual, and this is the part of yourself that you need to tend to constantly in order to have clear direction in your life, in order to know what kind of activities and decisions you need to make to feel more contented, and in order to know to be able to discern what's important in your life and what's not. So, this idea of tending to your spiritual self is the same as tending to a garden or tending to a child. You need to actually consciously make time for it and bring your attention to it and see it as a worthwhile exercise. If I can leave any kind of message with you today, I would really love it to be this, that these major challenges that we're facing as a species, and you are probably facing as an individual, this sense of confusion, this loneliness, this isolation or ill health, does have an antidote. There is a simple way for you to start moving into a better state of health across your whole being, and that is by acknowledging that you do have a spiritual self, that you do have a soul, and allowing some time in your day to actually get to know it and to start tending to it, to start giving it some attention, increasing perhaps meditation time, or becoming more creative, or becoming more attuned to what your physical, mental, emotional, or energetic needs are. So if you find this topic of spiritual neglect interesting, please do stay on board for the episode next week, where I really dive deep into what an ego is and why an ego is such a powerful ally in your life, not something to be afraid of. So I really hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you want to know anything about me or how you can work with me or have access to more teachings, you can visit my website at www.isharopitcoach.com.au, or just stay tuned for the launch of the Higher Life Academy, which will be coming up in a few months. So until next time, take care and love life.